Dream with ambition. Lead with conviction. And see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before.
Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States, a symbol of progress and a trailblazer in American politics. But behind the polished public image and the historic firsts, there lies a much more complicated narrative. What if I told you that Kamala Harris, the woman many celebrate as a hero, also has a side that's far less flattering? Today, we're diving into the dark side of Kamala Harris's career, the side that critics say reveals a far more complex figure. To understand the controversy, we first need to know, who is Kamala Harris? Her story is one of ambition, intelligence, and yes, controversy. Harris was born in Oakland, California on October 20, 1964. Her background is as diverse as it gets. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, was a breast cancer researcher from India, hailing from a Tamil Brahmin family. Her father, Donald Harris, is a Jamaican-born economist who taught at Stanford University. Growing up, Kamala was influenced by both her mother's Hindu faith and her father's Christian beliefs, attending both a Black Baptist church and a Hindu temple. This blend of cultures and religious backgrounds has shaped not only her identity, but also her approach to public service. Harris's identity is a key part of her public image. As a woman of color who identifies as both Black and South Asian, she has often spoken about the importance of representation and breaking barriers. But it's also this complex background that has sometimes made her a polarizing figure. Her rise to power was meteoric, and by 2016, she was elected as a U.S. Senator.
Our new U.S. Senator, Kamala Harris!
But the real spotlight came in 2020, when she was chosen as Joe Biden's running mate and became the first female vice president of the United States.
Did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
A historic achievement, no doubt, but at what cost? So what exactly are the controversies that tarnish Harris's legacy? Let's start with her record on criminal justice, a record that's far from squeaky clean. As San Francisco's DA, Harris established herself as tough on crime, a stance that resonated with voters at the time. But in hindsight, many of her policies appeared draconian, especially when you consider their impact on minority communities. Take her infamous truancy law, for example, which threatened parents with jail time if their children skipped school.
Investigators say Katrina and Emilio Chavez face charges because they had been sending their 3 kids to school.
School leaders have this message for parents. Get your kids to school and on time or face jail time.
The policy was meant to reduce truancy, but critics argue it disproportionately targeted low-income families already struggling to stay afloat.
The latest profit angle by governments across the United States is so-called truancy laws, where parents and children are fined and sometimes put into prison for merely being late to school. Consider, for example, the case of Diane Tran, a 17-year-old honor student. She was sent to jail for 24 hours and forced to pay a $100 fine for breaking Texas's truancy laws, which define truancy as, and I'm quoting here, missing 3 full or partial days in a 4-week period or 10 days in 6 months. Tran, who had been helping support her family by working 2 jobs on top of her strenuous schoolwork, remember she's an honor student, was shown no mercy by the court.
But it doesn't stop there. As California's Attorney General, Harris's office fought to keep nonviolent offenders behind bars.
She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California,
citing the need for cheap labor that was being used to fight California's wildfires. To many, this sounded like modern-day slavery, with the state profiting from incarcerated individuals who were paid mere pennies for life-threatening work.
We make $1 an hour when we're out here on the fires. I'm in prison, so I guess I take what I can get.
And then there's her stance on civil rights. On the one hand, Harris has been a vocal advocate for marriage equality and other progressive causes.
The fight for civil rights must be fought and won with each generation.
But on the other hand, she has been criticized for not doing enough to hold police accountable for misconduct, particularly during a time when public trust in law enforcement was already at an all-time low. Some say these actions reveal a pattern of prioritizing political ambition over the very people she claims to represent. To understand where these controversies arose, we have to go back to where it all started, California, the liberal heartland of America. But here's the twist. Even in one of the most progressive states in the country, Kamala Harris's actions often seemed out of step with the very voters who elected her. In San Francisco, her hometown, Harris built her reputation as a tough prosecutor, but her policies quickly drew criticism from civil rights groups and community activists.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
And I inhaled. I did inhale.
She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so.
And as Attorney General, her decisions in Sacramento put her at odds with many of the state's most progressive leaders. Despite, or perhaps because of these controversies, Harris continued her rise to power. The controversies surrounding Kamala Harris didn't reach their peak until 2019, during her campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. It was during this period that her record was put under a microscope.
Now that she is running for president and her record is being questioned on a number of these issues.
As Harris took the stage in the Democratic primaries, her opponents and the media began to zero in on her record as a prosecutor. Progressive candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were quick to point out the discrepancies between Harris's campaign rhetoric and her past actions. Although she eventually dropped out of the race, the scrutiny didn't end there. As vice president, Harris has faced continued criticism, particularly over her handling of the border crisis.
Kamala Harris has been grilled on the record high number of illegal crossings at the US-Mexico border,
and her perceived absence from key policy debates. It seems that no matter how high she climbs, the shadows of her past continue to follow her. But why do these controversies matter? After all, every politician has their critics, right? Well, in Kamala Harris's case, the stakes are higher. First, there's the issue of trust. For many voters, especially those in the communities directly affected by her policies, these controversies aren't just political games. They're personal. When a leader's actions don't align with their words, it erodes trust, not just in that leader, but in the system as a whole. Second, there's the question of how these controversies influence her current role as vice president and her potential future ambitions. Harris is seen by many as the future of the Democratic Party, but these controversies could be a stumbling block on her path to higher office. And finally, these issues matter because they reflect broader societal debates about criminal justice, civil rights, and the balance between maintaining order and ensuring justice. Kamala Harris's record is a microcosm of these larger issues, making her one of the most polarizing figures in modern American politics. In some cases, Harris has acknowledged her critics and expressed regret for certain decisions, like her role in promoting the truancy law that disproportionately affected low-income families. In interviews, she has emphasized that her intentions were to protect children and keep them in school, but she admits that the implementation may have caused unintended harm.
And I regret that that has happened, and never was the intention. Yeah. Never was the intention.
However, on other issues, Harris has been more defensive, arguing that her actions were consistent with her duties as a prosecutor. She's pointed to her record on civil rights, citing her work to combat housing discrimination and her support for marriage equality as evidence of her commitment to justice. Still, these responses haven't silenced all her critics. Many feel that her attempts to walk a fine line between being tough on crime and a champion of civil rights have resulted in mixed messages and conflicting actions. In the end, Kamala Harris's story is a reminder that in politics, nothing is ever black and white. It's up to us, the voters, to decide which side of the story we believe and which side of history we want to be on. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth looks at the figures shaping our world.